a second viewing. New look, same great taste. I'm Kyle.
I'm Dan.
Shaka bra. Today on the podcast, we got a special treat for y'all. We're doing Drive, the 2011 Nicolas Winding Refn film, starring our boy, and I think everyone's boy, really, Ryan Gosling.
He's become he's got quite the following.
He almost has meme status. Do you think he's meme status?
Like only if he's shirtless and I don't know. There's a reference to his abs or something.
So like pretty much.
Yeah. So meme worthy.
Yeah, he's pretty much meme worthy.
The guy's a meme god at this point.
He's pretty much a meme god. But this movie in particular, Drive, I think is a really fun movie to talk about just because it's the kind of flick if you talk to anyone about, they've probably seen or heard about it. And it's kind of interesting because it comes from this art house director, and it kind of fits in this limbo between like people who maybe like higher art films, but also people who just like maybe blockbusters or a wider audience of
It's a really
genre.
nice sweet spot in between the mainstream and sort of the art house side of things. But
Yeah.
I think it kind of appeals to everyone in the way that, it's visually, the story's told fantastically. And when there is dialogue, you're really in tune because they don't say a ton in this movie.
But I think what lends its ability to make that interesting is that the movie just moves so fast. Nothing ever really feels that like it gets dragging on a lot.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's cut very quick, and these scenes don't take very long. They're only usually there's not a lot of like, maybe with the exception of one or two scenes, there's not a lot of long takes. And it's overall I think it's really accessible. One thing we were just kind of talking about was just seems like the kind of movie that often gets people into movies. It's a good entry point kind of film where maybe you only really watch superhero films or you only watch like Hollywood blockbusters. But if you watch Drive, you might be more inclined to check out some more avant-garde or art house films just because it's a good entry point. I think it can lead you towards a direction of just expanding your interest in film.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think the soundtrack is also a part that really gets me heavily.
Oh, dude,
Like,
this fucking soundtrack is
fantastic.
killer.
Yeah.
We both have it on our phones. We listen to it in our cars
It's true.
while we're driving, and it's a pretty good time. But actually, we might bring that up a little bit later.
Yeah, definitely. It's worth expanding on
Should
more.
we get started, though? Do you want to give us a synopsis here?
Yeah, let's jump in. So Ryan Gosling plays a nameless but skilled Hollywood stuntman and getaway driver for thieves in this 2011 crime drama. Everything changes when he gets involved with one of his neighbor's families and the father's crime history.
Right. So there is this. It's a crime drama for sure, and people would definitely maybe call it like a neo-noir like crime drama because it kind of looks at this like 60s style of filmmaking. Italian cinema did a lot of like noir, the classic black and white like top hat, lights a smoke and drops it in a back alley.
Yeah.
And he's talking like, yeah, you talking to me, boy? That kind of like look. But
It's
instead
definitely got
bringing
that
it,
sort of
like updating that for a newer audience. But it
just shines a light on the darker side of the Hollywood side of things. Because
totally.
he's a stunt driver and he's involved with that kind of crowd, but on the darker side of things, on the more unlucky side of things.
It is interesting to think that he does kind of have this maybe not average job, but like a regular job, I guess. Maybe it seems unusual to us because we don't live in Hollywood, but I assume if you live in Hollywood, if you work in film, it's not as crazy. Anyways, but you're right. He does choose kind of the darker path in a way. Like that's something that he is comfortable with, and it's just kind of how he chooses to make a living.
During the night, he's picking up jobs, basically being the getaway driver.
Yeah, but it's always interesting to me how he doesn't really associate himself at all with the organizations that are behind these issues.
Oh, he has got a firm set of rules.
He doesn't want anything to do with it. He just drives.
Exactly.
That's just what he does. And it is interesting because we end up seeing kind of like a mafia-like plot develop in which he's reluctant to become a part of, but due to other circumstances, he feels the need to put his foot in there and, do what he sees fit. But I think that's actually a pretty good point to get started here. We got a couple of main topics we wanted to reach. And the first one is just kind of what we label as the driver's interaction with those around him. So those relationships that he builds upon. And I think the biggest one that is probably within the film, but also just starts the rest of the plot, really just kind of kickstarts it, is his relationship with his neighbor Irene. played by Carey Mulligan, quite wonderfully. Used to date the Beef, Shia LaBeouf.
Used to date the Beef,
She
dude.
used to
That's a
date the
big
Beef.
deal. That's a big
No
deal.
longer does. I think she might be married to the dude from Mumford & Sons. I don't really know. I don't care to fact check that right now. But
Fair. And her son, right?
And her son, Benicio, yeah.
Benicio, yeah.
Yeah.
So you get the impression that at this point when you meet her, that the father has recently left. You later find out that he's in prison and he's coming back.
Right.
But you can see that there's some sort of like they've got a spark. The driver, the main character, Ryan Gosling, he actually doesn't have a name in this movie, so I guess we'll refer to him as Driver or Ryan.
On IMDb they call him Driver, so we'll go by that for now. But yeah, and they just kind of call him like Kid or Boy or throughout the film. They don't really give him an actual name. And it's one of those things we don't really think about it. The second time around, on our second viewing here, it definitely was like a little bit...
I was paying attention to find out what his name was, but you never come across it, nor do you really need it.
Yeah, it's not important, which I think usually in film when there's like an unnamed character, it's just supposed to kind of be that like vacant idea where like the viewer can maybe try to relate with that guy.
Right.
Which is interesting.
That being said, like you know when someone tells you the name of a restaurant and you almost judge it in your mind before you go to the restaurant?
Judging a book by its cover,
exactly.
sort of.
So, you could go to a 5-star restaurant, but it's called Mel's Fun Time Diner. And, you're going to think it's the shittiest place on earth until you go there. 5 stars out of 10? Or what's that about? No, like 5 out of 5. Like, I'm just, theoretically. So I think it's kind of cool that he doesn't have a name, so you don't prejudge him. You're based on his interactions and what he does,
right,
is how you define him. So he doesn't need a name.
No,
all you need to know is that he drives.
He just drives. And I think having this kind of like maybe like vacant or open space of a personality is interesting because he has kind of two personalities throughout this whole film, as far as I'm concerned, and that there's two sides to him. He always kind of wants to do the right thing, but it's hard to say when is he doing the right thing and when is he not doing the right thing?
See, I think he knows the difference, but I think he just loves to drive. I think he uses those late night getaway drives that he does for thieves. I think he uses that as a chance to hone his skills or an excuse to hone his skills.
Right.
He doesn't want anything to do with the industry, and by the end of the movie, we end up finding out that he doesn't care about money. Like that's not what he's in it for at all. So
yeah, he does have this love for like cars, not I guess driving too, because we find out that his employer, played by Bryan Cranston, his name's Shannon, just kind of says, this guy just showed up one day, needed a job. I said, sure, show me what you can do. And he's a born natural, and I pay him way less than I should, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. He just generally just wants to be there and wants to be around cars and be to himself and work.
I kind of think that the reason why he would be looking for a job at a shop is that it's easy access for him to fix up his car, and he's out driving. He can't be on a getaway drive and have his car break down, right?
Yeah, and also him and Shannon kind of have this sort of business relationship where he gets him the Chevy Impala so he can do his getaway trips because
that's the most cool common scene car to talk about. Yeah, so they're walking through the shop and they're passing some really nice vehicles, like I don't know, old Mustangs. Seems like slightly vintage cars in there.
Yeah.
So they're passing these cars as they walk through, and the camera's following them maybe on a dolly, and then eventually as they arrive at the Chevy Impala, Shannon's bringing up the most, he's talking about the engine first, then he's talking about, I don't know, the suspension or the turning, and then he brings up the Chevy Impala, the most common vehicle in LA.
No one's going to notice you.
Yeah. And then throws them the keys and off they go. So you get the impression that they've done this before, they're going to do it again, and it's definitely not their first run of the mill here.
Well, yeah, and he even stumbles upon a man in a diner a little bit later in the film where he's like, last year you drove me and my brother home from Palm Springs, man.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that.
So that is a cool scene because it establishes the fact that Ryan, or the driver, wants nothing to do with the other side of the business, like the actual thieving.
Exactly.
He doesn't want to get involved with these scuzzy guys robbing pawn shops or whatever they were robbing. He doesn't want to get involved with that shit. So when the guy comes over and says, yeah, my brother got himself killed. Remember you drove us last year? Thanks for that, by the way, or whatever.
He's like, talk again and I'll break your fucking teeth or something like that. Yeah, it's crazy. He doesn't really... I do find it a little bit interesting, though, because, he drives home the point that we kind of.
No pun intended.
Yeah, actually that was intended, but whatever. He doesn't want anything to do with like the actual businesses that he's driving for or whatever kind of gang related activities going on. But at the same time, we don't necessarily see a lot of like why he likes driving. He just does. It's
Right.
a little like, I mean, obviously I don't know if we need more of that, but in the back of my head I'm always wondering, it's like, well, why does he care so much about the car? Like, why is driving his thing? Part of me is trying to find that, but I guess at the same time, maybe that's the point. We're not supposed to know. We're just supposed to know this guy is a driver, and that's it. That's what he is. He's simply a driver.
That being said, I think if you looked hard enough at the film, or if like you're really analytically forcing a reason, you could come up with some
Probably.
loose symbolism behind. He doesn't have a lot of relationship. But he loves his car. Maybe it's because he can escape. Social. You know what I mean? You could make a
it's not even
loose
that he has like
connection.
one particular car. He just likes to drive anything.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I see what you're saying. I think you're right. We probably could find some if we really dug for
But
it.
I don't
But there's
think
nothing. There's nothing right on the surface about it, which is interesting.
I think the movie as a whole doesn't. You don't necessarily need that. I mean, all you need to know is that he likes drive. He meets this neighbor, gets involved with the family, and then eventually, sees something through, sees a problem through to help them. So he goes.
He's trying to get from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You got to drive.
Oh my God, that's horrible. So he's got this thing. He's got this spiel he says whenever he meets a new thug that he's about to drive for, and it's like, oh, once we get there, you've got 5 minutes.
Right.
You've got me for that 5 minutes. Anything goes down in that 5 minutes, I'm yours. I got you.
Yeah.
But anything before or after that 5, you're on your own. Like, I don't fuck around. Like, sorry, you're done. So, and I think he sort of applies that same mentality.
Just to like his like interactions in general with people.
Yeah, well, I think he applies that same mentality to most of his interactions.
Okay.
Right? And the thing that really breaks that is that family next door. The time he's with them, he's really with them. Like he's in them for the end.
Yeah.
It's not on either side of that 5 minutes. It's now become all 24 hours of the day he's in it.
He definitely wants some sort of like stability, I think, obviously, or something. But something about having a family makes him feel comfortable, or even just bringing joy to the son and being around Irene. I think you get the sense that like he has this job that he's passionate about. It's what he cares about. But then it's also easy to translate that like he cares just as much about this family.
Yeah.
And he happens to mix the two things he cares about, which kind of leads him into shit.
It does lead him into a bit of a kerfuffle. But
a good kerfuff.
A good kerfuff. But it's cool to see him. I mean, we don't know why he loves driving so much, but we can see why he loves this family so much.
Exactly, yeah.
The girl's timid but intelligent, and you could tell she's maybe been through some rough times. They're still in the middle of it. When they first meet, the first time they ever speak was her car was broken down, and Ryan Gosling didn't even really introduce himself when he walked over. He just walked over to the car and instantly started helping, and it was just kind of like next thing you know, he's involved with, like, he's part of the family.
He's unpacking groceries. He's bringing it upstairs for them.
Yeah.
I guess they are neighbors, so it's not necessarily like out of place. But you're right. There's a spark that happens, and he really grows a liking towards them. Like he's
definitely
he's
connects
kind
with
and he's
the
warm.
family.
He watches TV with the kid, which is actually a pretty important scene. They're watching TV. Like a cartoon or something maybe. Mm-hmm. And he asks the kid, he's like, who's the bad guy? And he's like, oh, that one over there. He's like, how do you know he's the bad guy? Because he's doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
And it's this kind of moment where you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, so this is where the movie is establishing what's bad and what's not bad.
Right.
But, like, at the same time, who defines what's bad stuff and not bad stuff?
I guess you could argue that it's Ryan. It's the driver. By the end of the movie, it's Ryan Gosling that's deciding that. And
we'll talk a little bit more of that a little bit later because there's some really cool symbolism and some character traits in this flick. But I think talking about the family and how the plot progresses through that.
Yeah.
Through Irene's, I guess, baby daddy.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about Irene and what we know about her. And we find out a bunch of different things about her. But what we can tell right off the bat is that she's almost kind of shy, timid, though independent and very intelligent.
Yeah, I think she's just really. She's the kind of person that was fine on her own, but she really brings Ryan Gosling's character in with open arms and kind of like maybe wasn't looking for someone to share her time with, but he just seems like the right guy that she wants to spend time with.
Right, like Ryan is not dragging her down. If anything,
Not
they're just
one
on
bit.
equal grounds.
No,
which is
they're
kinda
not
cool.
intrusive really in each other's lives at all. In fact, the only time you could say she's intrusive is when her and her son show up to the shop, but they had no idea he was going to be working that day or whatever. Like, they get there just to get their car fixed. He happens to work at an automobile shop, you know.
Yeah.
She wasn't even trying to get a ride home from him. It was a bit of a coincidence, sure, but at the same time, there was no one was like chasing one another or anything like that.
Right.
It was in.
Well, hold on. I think I remember there's a scene where they're talking about what he does for a living. He says he's a Hollywood stuntman and he works at...
Yeah, he tells him the location of the automobile shop,
And then
but she's still not really trying to like...
Right.
Like I said, she doesn't know he's working there that day. And
Yeah, exactly.
I think she might even mention, oh, that's really close to here, isn't it?
She probably just was like, I mean, naturally, if you found out your neighbor worked at an automotive shop,
Exactly.
next time your car broke down, you'd probably go to that one because your neighbor works there. Right?
Completely. But in terms of any romantic relationship or even just them caring for one another, nothing feels forced.
Yeah.
Nothing feels forced on that whatsoever. Although I guess you could say that his the driver's love or even care for them is quite exponential. Like he really cares for them and quite fast.
Yeah.
He,
for me, when I could tell that he really cared about them was when he drove them home after their auto, like
After he fixed their car,
after
yeah.
he fixed the car, or the car was getting worked on because it needed to stay there for a couple of days,
Yeah.
and because they were neighbors, he would give her a ride home. But then he said, "Do you want to see something?" And they go for some drive by some river, and they hang out for a while, and they
go
come
on,
home
this,
late into the night.
Under some underpass, they're like driving around this like...
Yeah.
It's actually kind of like a famous like LA like scene. You see it in a lot of movies.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's like a water runoff.
There might even be a reference to some like spy or like crime movies that have used that same.
Potentially.
Because there's a lot of this movie is kind of like it makes you feel like it's a little bit of like a movie that was made in the 80s.
Yeah.
It has that feel, especially with the music and the way it looks. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe that was a somewhat intentional choice.
And the choice of outfits, like,
Yeah, nothing really. Yeah, like and
the bowling shirts and the elastic tight jackets around the waist and arms, but they're like puffy almost. You know what I mean?
But it still feels so modern at the same time. It feels so like sleek and. I mean,
It has a
it's pushing
really
5 years
cool
old now, but
look to it, which
Yeah.
we're definitely going to jump into a little bit more. But we're talking about this girl, Irene.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think we find out that she had her son when she was 17 or 18. She was knocked up when she was 17.
Yeah.
And had the son when she was 18.
A year later, yeah.
So she's pretty young. She met this guy at a party. They got into it. They got married right away. Mind you, he was into some bad stuff, and he ended up in prison.
Yeah.
So you find out that, she was pretty young when he was born, and he's pretty young now. So meaning she's, I'm guessing maybe 25, 26 would be my guess.
That sounds about right, yeah.
And I guess Ryan Gosling would probably be in the same
Yeah, they seem about the same
zone-ish.
age, yeah.
Yeah, potentially. So that's kind of an interesting thing, especially that she had the kids so young.
Yeah, I mean, not even that, but her, her husband or the child's father was vacant for so long of, his life and her taking care of him alone. Not easy, obviously. So I think it does definitely add to, the idea of the viewers viewing these two people together, and this Ryan Gosling's characters comes in to help the family, but indirectly, and you kind of see their friendship and relationship blossom, and you definitely get a warm sense of like you want them to end up together. They seem right for each other. They just do, and not that her husband, his name's like I can't remember his name. Standard. That's what.
Yeah, his name is Standard.
It's
yeah,
a strange name.
It is.
But that also is that another car reference. That's all I'm thinking. Like you're in Standard.
I don't know. Maybe.
But I think it's interesting because he doesn't come off as a bad guy. He just kind of he gets in some bad things, but they still welcome him with open arms, and the rest of the family is happy to see him there nonetheless. He wants to change his act. He wants to clean himself up.
It seems like he's really trying to turn stuff around. At that party, like his welcome home party, there's a scene where he said, "Yeah, we're all here celebrating, and that's great, and I appreciate everyone here, but." I did a bad thing and I have a lot of fixing to do or something like that. So,
Right.
yeah, you get the impression, maybe he did some bad stuff, he fucked up, but he's not a bad guy.
No.
He's working towards it. He's very, very loving towards his son, bringing him out to take the trash
Yeah,
out,
definitely.
like trying to teach him things.
He
and all
wants to
that
be
kind of
involved,
stuff.
and he
He loves his
problem.
family.
He has no problem with that. He knows he's done wrong. He wants to do better. But with his introduction to the film, the plot progresses, and I think we're going to take a break now and get into that right after the break right here. So we'll catch you guys later.
And we're back.
All right, guys. So before we took a break there, we were just talking about some of the relationships within the movie Drive and some characters that kind of progress the plot. One of the big characters being Oscar Isaac's character, Standard, who kind of introduces, I guess, Ryan Gosling's character to, the darker side of the world he's kind of dabbled in, but this is only a kind of a dabble that, respects just to his job, but now he kind of finds himself in between this world because he's trying to help the family he cares about.
Right.
But also, it's interesting because he really does kind of seem to care about Oscar, I want to say Oscar Isaac, but Standard. But do you think that's just because of Irene? Probably, hey.
I think he began to develop a relationship with him because of Irene. Now,
Right.
I think maybe he started to care for the guy or see the best in the guy, too.
Yeah.
Because he seems upset. He says, to one of the people that was involved with killing him eventually, he says, you've killed the boy's father today, kind of thing. So
Right.
you can tell he cares about him to an extent. That being said, the only reason I think he's there is because the people that have threatened Standard have now threatened his family.
Yeah, and
Irene and
he
Benzio.
wants to stand up for them, and I think he needs to. He has this this nature in him that just he has to help them.
Yeah,
He's
so
gonna do whatever it takes
he's
to
this
help them.
good-natured individual that he wants to help people.
I don't know if he's good altogether, though. I'll be honest with you.
Well, I think there's flaws in his morals a little bit, but I think generally, he does what he does because he thinks it's the right way or he's doing the right thing.
I think a lot of the times he's actually kind of fighting the bad in him. I think he's
Right.
trying to focus on the good, but he has this rage and he has this power, kind of overpowering instinct that kind of comes over him sometimes. And we'll get to that in just a minute, but just kind of talking about where this film leads on, we kind of see the characters he meets earlier in the film, like Bryan Cranston's character Shannon, and also the people that he kind of aligns himself with just for his day-to-day job, end up becoming the people he fights against because they're part of the people who end up setting up Standard when he gets shot and killed, essentially.
Yeah.
While, of course, Ryan Gosling's character is trying to help him out. So he kind of gets stuck between this triangle of, just trying to work for his boss, trying to help a girl out, and also trying to do the right thing. And
Right.
I don't know, he's just the kind of guy that ends up getting himself stuck in a bunch of positions
It's
that
right,
all are
yeah.
intertwined together.
I think, maybe a good analogy is he's been fighting, a small darkness in his heart since the beginning of the movie, but it's only the size of a thumbnail. But by the time he gets introduced to this underground ring, he's fighting the darkness in his life becomes the size of a fist. It's so much bigger now, and now he's fighting this big battle.
And does he throw some punches?
Oh,
This
he
guy
throws some punches.
This guy knows how to punch. Dude.
It's really a cool, sweet, actiony movie.
Yeah, some of these fight scenes are really well choreographed. No shaky cam, none of that BS.
Yeah, and it's not like a movie you got to be into cars to watch.
Not at all. The more we talk about the movie, the more I realize it's about cars.
Yeah.
Kind of. I could barely notice the car, but the more you actually break down the movie, there's a lot of car references, and his life kind of revolves around cars, I guess. But no, like you said, you don't need to care about cars to get
Appreciate the movie, yeah.
But I think that's maybe kind of where we'll leave it with some of the relationships. We don't want to give the entire story away. We obviously spoiled everything as far as we're concerned, but there's more to enjoy for yourself. So
I think we've covered the main points of every character. So it's gonna be...
but looking more at the main character, I think is what's important, and that's his jacket, and the idea of him being this hero and him also being this anti-hero in the way that he's this bad guy doing good things.
Right. So more about the jacket is he's got this silver I think I was talking about it before. It's got an elastic band around sort of the waist and the arms, but it's a little bit puffy. It's sort of got like almost like a weird 80s look to it.
It's almost like I don't even know.
It's hard to describe. It's kind of cool. It looks almost vest-like.
It reminds me a bit of maybe like a race car driver would wear it.
Yeah.
Not while working, but like as fashion, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, I get that impression too. But anyways, on the back, it's a sort of a silver and gold jacket, and on the back is a scorpion.
Gold scorpion. And the scorpion has a lot of symbolism because he brings up a fable of the scorpion and the frog. Mm-hmm. And the scorpion and the frog is this fable in which a scorpion asks a frog if he'll carry him across the river. And the frog says, like, no, you're just going to sting me. Like, I'm scared to sting you. And the scorpion says, well, if I sting you, you're going to drown, and therefore so will I. Why would I sting you? It doesn't make any sense. So the frog agrees to bring him across the river. And when they go across the river, the scorpion stings him anyway, and they both die. And the reason because that is because no matter what the scorpion wants to do, it's in his nature to act a certain way, which is exactly what this character does. He wants to do the right thing, or he wants to at least show that he can do the right thing, but at the end of the day, who he is who he is.
Best of him, yeah.
Exactly.
Definitely.
And that's exactly what happens in this movie. And it's such a cool analogy. I had to look up the story. I had to look up the fable. After we watched the film yesterday, I was like, I want to look that up. And it makes complete sense. I mean, it's one of those things that might go over your head if you don't know the fable. Maybe you do. I'm not too sure where that's originated from or where else you would hear it from, but nevertheless, it's kind of what the whole movie's about in a sense, because you get this man who, he meets his family and he wants to help them out and he wants to, be a part of their lives in a positive sense. But at night, he's kicking the shit out of people. He's, busting skulls. Like, whenever he puts this jacket on, he kind of becomes a different person.
Right.
Not in every scene. We kind of went into this movie thinking that, jacket's on, he's a piece of shit now. But, there are some times where he puts the jackets on and he's doing the good thing, or he puts the jacket on the kid, and we made the joke that there'll be Drive 2 where the kid will come back and wear the jacket and start kicking some ass. Benicio's revenge.
But no, I think especially in the beginning it's really popular. It's
like prevalent within like.
Yeah, I think the jacket distinguishes the 2 points of his character, but I think those 2 points just eventually mesh into one nature. That's him,
Yeah.
Instead of fighting the who he is at night versus who he is during the day, or when he has the jacket on or when he doesn't, it's sort of just brought together towards the middle of the film. It's like you just realize that like he's not one or the other, he's both.
Yeah,
and so it does at that point. It almost doesn't matter if he has the jacket on or not, because like that, the nature of him being different in depending on the outfit just becomes the nature of him, and then that's it.
I think that's true. I think they try to maybe, or like, Refn's probably trying to like make that symbolism from the beginning, like, oh, this is what the jacket's supposed to represent. Or whether you know what it's supposed to represent directly, it's like, oh, well, he's doing bad things now because he's working at night kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I do think he still is that scorpion, because he might be wanting to do the right thing, but he goes around it in a pretty violent and negative way,
Yeah.
And another contrast, though, to him wearing this jacket is I noticed every time he's doing maybe the right thing, or he's with the family, or everything's kind of happy, everyone in that scene is always wearing the color blue. Most notably at any of the dinner scenes, everyone in the family is wearing blue. And blue is often a color of like comfort or stability or calming. And those scenes feel that way. They generally do. Yeah, maybe if they're talking about some serious subjects, you still feel safe. The film you don't necessarily feel like anything bad's going to happen to you. In fact, you feel like, oh, things might work out because, this plan sounds sound. Like, it's going to work out in their favor. But then, even like the nighttime will roll around, and the idea of what might have seemed right at one point is kind of flipped on its head. And it's like these characters we kind of learned about earlier start being a lot more violent and a lot more evil as the film progresses.
We end up finding out what Driver Ryan Gosling is capable of.
Oh, totally.
Right? Like, he gets involved with Standard, that's the father of Benicio and wife of Irene. Yeah. And Standard Driver reveals to Ryan Gosling that his family's been threatened and he has to do this one job, and then he'll finally be out of it for good to repay a debt that he had owed in prison or something like that. And so Ryan Gosling helps. Like, he says, okay, well, I'll help you, kind of thing. And what ends up unfolding is they have to go rob a pawn shop. And there's 3 people involved. So there's Standard, there's Ryan Gosling, and then there's a girl. There's a third party.
It's played by Christina Hendricks.
Hendricks. And they all, or Ryan Gosling, he drives. So he's sitting in the car waiting. He starts that clock. You've got 5 minutes.
I mean, who else is going to drive, right?
Yeah,
the guy drives.
The guy drives. So the other 2 go into the pawn shop. The girl leaves first with a big bag of seemingly cash at first. She hops in the back, and they're patiently waiting for Standard to come out. But in the meantime, there's another vehicle that pulls up alongside with tinted windows, looking somewhat suspicious. And as Standard
I was scared. I was like, some shit's going down.
Yeah.
This is not ending well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way.
And then as Standard's walking out, everything seems to be okay. He puts the gun back, under his belt or whatever, behind his shirt, and he gets shot in the back 3 times.
It's a done deal.
Boom, it's gone. And I don't know, you get this, that's kind of, you get this point where you get the feeling that what Ryan's really capable of, or what Driver's really capable of, because he flees the scene. There's a huge chase scene. He takes this chick to a hotel room. He's now weighing all his options. Who did this to us?
Right,
if there's anyone that knows anything, it's this girl. And then he gets ambushed and he takes out 2 guys, right? Like there's 2 guys that try to
with
come
a
in.
Shotgun.
Yeah, someone
and a
with
mattress. Some clever use of the mattress.
So you find out what this guy's capable of.
Yeah,
definitely.
definitely.
He basically takes out 2 guys with guns that are trying to kill him, and then it's like war. It's like onwards from there. Now he's in it, right? Now he's in there to protect Irene. He doesn't want the money. He wants to rid himself of this issue. He's not like fleeing and going to Mexico or whatever.
No.
He
just knows where
needs to fix this.
Yeah,
basically.
he knows that he has the ability to kind of make the best of the situation, and he has the skill set of driving amazingly and also being a really good fighter, apparently, also.
Yeah.
And he uses that to the best of his ability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like that's when shit kind of gets messed up for this character. He has all this money. He just saw 2 people die. He's kind of like, he just killed 2 men.
Yeah.
Things are really boiling up for him.
Things are heavy.
Yeah. And one scene that definitely kind of, for me, still solidifies like him being the Scorpion, or him like having this kind of like nature that he needs to act on, is probably the best scene in the movie, in my opinion, is like the elevator scene.
Yeah.
In which he goes back to essentially tell Irene
what's
that,
going on.
So-and-so has happened. I have this money. I'm going to give it back, but also I can maybe use it, and you and Benicio can have this money if you guys need it, kind of thing. And she slaps him.
Yeah.
And she's like, what are you talking about? Why are you getting, like, it's as if like she's thinking to herself, why are you getting wound up in this? Probably seeing some symbols of her ex-husband in him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's upset. And then she's like, let's just go walk. So they walk, and they go into this elevator in which he comes across essentially a man who's looking for him. He's the bad guy.
The guy's looking suspicious. He's got a gun under his suit, you can tell.
Yeah.
He's sort of got these wandering eyes looking at Ryan.
Like, he's a hitman, essentially. And meanwhile, though, the driver is just trying to kind of have this moment with Irene and kind of, clarify the situation. Just, again, like we were talking about, make the best of the situation, try to do what he can to, make things right. But as soon as he realizes that shit's going to go down, the whole shot slows down. It's this really, like, smooth moving scene, and he turns over to Irene, and they just start kissing in the elevator, which I think is the first time they have any physical contact in the movie.
Yeah, it's the first time they have an intimate interaction, but
and
it's kind of
really
cool
implied.
Because he just, like, he looks at her in such a stressful situation, and, it's like he finally has some form of clarity. Like, he knows what he wants, he knows what he has to do, he knows what he's doing, kind of.
Yeah, it's this really beautiful moment that they share. And, like, the whole movie kind of almost works up to that point because, like we were saying, they have this spark and, like, they're obviously into each other to a degree or care about each other. And, yeah, there's this relationship being built there. But, yeah, once they share that moment, it's really sweet and quite tender. But then, literally 2 seconds later, this guy comes after Ryan and he kind of, like, throws her out of the elevator, essentially. Pushes her out.
He pushes her back, right?
So that she's not being, harmed. Mm-hmm. And then when he just essentially beats the shit out of this guy and, like, pummels him to the ground and kills him with his fist right in front of her, and as she watches him kill this man in terror.
Yeah. And there's a quick shot, and you see Ryan Gosling's foot inside this dude's skull, he has been stomped to bits.
Yeah, they're pretty like some of the actual I guess deaths are quite graphic in this movie. Heads just getting entire skulls getting ripped off, and it's pretty grotesque in some ways, and it's a little bit jarring because the rest of the movie doesn't really have a. I mean, there's violence, but it doesn't feel violent. It's kind of this smooth.
I think they're trying to play up that realness of the crime world that they're in.
Okay, there's a bit of reality kind of putting into
they want to show off how gruesome these situations
it is shocking.
Can be.
It definitely is shocking.
Yeah, they don't want to make it fake and have blood spraying everywhere. Out of their arms or anything like that.
There is a level of realism. It's kind of cool because it feels so shocking that it almost doesn't feel real. It's out of place. But at the same time, you're right. What's the alternative? A bunch of kind of obviously fake scenes? No, I think they took a right choice.
They don't I don't think they overdo it with the violence, but I think they show enough to say this is real. This is a real situation. This is how close to a dangerous situation Ryan is, right?
Yeah,
and they contrast it to his life too, right? So you see these gruesome scenes and violence in comparison to what the rest we've seen in his life, which is driving and this one girl.
Yeah.
Right.
And he, even though he's doing all these awful things, I guess, or he's this violent man, he still has this instinct where he needs to help this lady, and that's the last scene we actually see Irene in. But after that, every other scene he's involved with is him still trying to at least guarantee them safety, right? Mm-hmm. So he's making deals with mafia leaders who he knows through his old employer and this and that. But at the end of the day, he still just wants to try to do something meaningful, I think, to himself. Mm-hmm. But I think the idea that he just can't change himself, even if he wants to, is really kind of prevalent. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, he doesn't. We don't really know exactly to what degree he succeeds at because, I mean, the man who promises Irene and Benicio safety is killed, so it's kind of hard to say where that ends up for them, and eventually so is the driver. But one cool part about that last kind of interaction he has where he's going and making this negotiation with Albert Brooks's character, Bernie, who I'm pretty sure is in the movie Knocked Up. We were trying to figure this out last night, but we're pretty sure he's in there.
Maybe he's in Knocked Up, but he's for sure in This Is 40.
He's in This Is 40 for sure?
Yeah.
Maybe he's not in Knocked... Anyways, he's in a Judd Apatow movie. Yeah. Don't worry about it, guys. We will, but you don't have to. Anyways, they have this altercation, but one cool part I think I kind of latched onto was... There's this last scene we pretty much see him in is him pummeling him to the ground and killing him, but all that's left is his shadow of himself. Mm-hmm. So I kind of wrote down this point that it ends with a shadow of his former self, who he was trying to get away from.
But no, isn't the last scene in the movie him almost asleep in the car, head leaned back, you can't tell if he's alive or dead still because he's been stabbed at that point.
Yeah, he drives away, but I think the shadow is supposed to symbolize the good he's trying to do. Right. And how that's not exactly him, but it's a shadow of himself. Right. At the end of the day, it's not totally who he is because he can't get away from that, but it's a part of him that's always going to be there, and he's trying to latch onto it. But at the end of the day, he drives, and that's like I said. That's how we see.
That's how the final scene ends, and it's so awesome. I mean, he's basically it looks like he's asleep or dead, or you can't really tell, and then he just sort of wakes up briefly, and you hear the ignition start, and he drives away, and it's
it's kind of like this movie's kind of like an action movie. Equivalent of a punchline. It's every scene has this kick-ass scene where it's punchline.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, putting it. It's like you're saying, you have the car in the engine, you hear the engine roll, and he drives off, and you're just kind of what a fucking badass. It's he's kind of
super cool.
Would you say that he's the dramatic version of Marty McFly?
Say that again. What?
Would you say he's the dramatic version of Marty McFly?
The dramatic version of Marty McFly
is comedic, but always a badass. Do you think he's dramatic, but always a badass? I'm starting to think so, dude.
To some degree, I guess you could say, yeah.
Because Marty McFly is maybe the coolest guy on earth. And I would say the driver is a close second. He's pretty damn cool.
Oh, dude, Ryan Gosling plays the most badass character. And he's always got a toothpick in his mouth, you know?
And he brings it up, too. He's like, hey, kid, you want a toothpick?
Hey, kid.
As if that's, like, what cool guys do. They have toothpicks all the time. I love it.
It's fucking sweet. It's like, you know, typically in this day and age, you don't get that whole toothpick in the corner of your mouth happening in movies anymore, like Grease style.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't get that much anymore.
But that is an ode to noir cinema. That is, like, a trope of that.
Having the toothpick?
Yeah,
is it really?
So they're trying to, you know, bring that to the forefront, I guess, or do something new with it, which is cool.
Kid, you want it.
And the last thing we're going to talk about is just the visuals. We've kind of graced this a little bit already, but this is just a movie that has that solid vaporwave aesthetic on point. You got that neon look. You got that product placement. I'm just kidding.
So I have to ask, because you would know this better than me, Kyle, is the director of this movie is the same director of Only God Forgives, too?
Yeah. He did direct Only God Forgives about a year afterwards and released in 2013, and you could see some similarities.
The
maybe
blues and red. Like I think
a lot
generally
of,
with this guy's films, they seem to be super colorful. Like there's a specific palette of colors that he uses to like aid the visuals. Like in this one, I noticed a lot of blues and a lot of like gold or
blue,
kind of like
blue, gold, and red were the three that really stuck out to me. That being said, though, I think a lot of the red and like maybe even the greens just kind of came from the street lights. The more I realized, because he's always driving. He's driving the city, and you kind of get this reflection of the street lamps on his face. And there's a few scenes where like he's definitely like angry, and then there's like the red street lamp brighting on his face as he stopped at a stoplight. Right. Which is kind of cool because it not only is it using like a set design, but it's also telling character development, which is really cool. Before this, Nicolas Winding Refn didn't really have a lot of like noticeably colored films. His film before this was Bronson, which is with Tom Hardy. Who's Tom Hardy? Oh,
Tom Hardy's Tom Hardy.
Yeah. But yeah, his film after this was Only God Forgives, and a lot of people sometimes tend to compare them just because they have a bit of a similar look, and they also both star Ryan Gosling. So they're kind of get looped together, but I mean, to anyone listening, I would try to separate them as much as you can because they're very different films.
They're totally different films, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can, you look at a director's movie and you can, like Wes Anderson, he has got a style of how he does films. Right. He makes very different movies. Like Life Aquatic is so much different than, I don't know, what's the most recent one, the elevator one?
Grand Budapest.
Grand Budapest. Like they're two totally different movies, but they've got a similar style.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'd say, you know, this director, you get a sense of his style, and I think it definitely aids his movies, but in different ways because they're different films.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it's strange because they do have a very similar look. And I mean, the way Only God Forgives was like advertised as like Only God Forgives from the creator of Drive. So immediately you're going to be like, oh, I saw Drive. Maybe it's going to be like that. It's not.
It's totally
Try not to put that in your mind. But I would still recommend Only God Forgives just based off that it is a great film. That being said, if you like Drive, you might not necessarily love Only God Forgives. Because it's a very...
it's a little bit longer.
There's a lot of... so much more symbolism. Honestly, if I were you, watch Only God Forgives and then watch like a 10 or 15 minute YouTube video on like deconstructing Only God Forgives, then you'll probably like it.
Or watch Only God Forgives like 7 times.
Yeah, make that your life.
Because realistically, there's so much information in it. There's tons of...
But yeah, just quickly ending on the visuals there, I think we can both agree that just the style alone is so... it's just... visually pleasing.
Beautiful it's really aesthetic, cool. Yeah. Like, I don't know, even the cover, like the font type, the pink words Drive and the font type and
it
sort
has
of
this 80s look too.
Yeah, it's got like a certain, it reminds me of, what's that movie, where Eddie Murphy's like a undercover cop or something? Or, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, exactly. Beverly Hills Cop.
No, not Beverly Hills Cop. There's another one.
Eddie Murphy being an undercover cop actually has happened several times, so it's kind of hard to...
Yeah, it's tough, but okay, if I figure out the name of this movie, I'll tweet it.
We'll tweet it.
Tweet it.
Please don't do it.
Okay, don't check out our Twitter, please don't. But...
Yeah, I see what you're saying, though. It does have that 80s kind of like cop look to it.
80s
but
aesthetic,
I think that's what he's trying to do. And the music, too. I mean, it's a bunch of new songs, obviously, but they have such a, like a...
spacey pop feel.
They have this, this dream pop, like, 80s, like, synth sound to it that is just so... it's irresistible. It's so catchy. Yeah. And, like, there were certain parts of this movie where I was just kind of like... I was shocking. I was
like, oh, the jams are so good.
So good,
Even if you don't go out and watch this movie, you know, if you're a busy guy, you don't have time to go catch this flick, make time for the soundtrack. Yeah,
Cliff Martinez,
it's so good.
Cliff Martinez does a lot of the production. along with a band called College. And those guys are awesome. Cliff Martinez did this music for Spring Breakers, by the way, which is an instant classic. We'll talk about that one day.
Instant classic. One of these days.
We'll get there
cover
maybe.
that.
But anyways, that's kind of probably where we're going to leave things with Drive today. Highly recommend this flick. Honestly, it's been one we've been wanting to do for quite some time. We kind of figured it'd be perfect for the cast.
That being said, guys, we did just launch our Patreon page, so go ahead and check that out if you'd like to support to the cast. If you can afford it, if you can't, no worries. Of course, it's always great to have you guys tuning in.
Yep.
Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever your social media outlet is. We've got it. So, and be sure to download our cast, listen to it in the car on the way to work. Whatever your game is, whatever your vice is.
Yeah, you can find us on all the podcast platforms these days. Just search Second Viewing. You can subscribe from there. Check out our RSS feed if you'd like. We're probably going to close it up for today. We'll see you guys next time, and catch you later.